Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We are delighted to welcome you to our event towards TICAD8, Advancing Africa's Economic Integration in the Post-Crisis Era, co-organized by Japan International Cooperation Agency, the United Nations Development Program, the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, and the African Development Bank. My name is Minoru Honma, Chief Representative JICA South Africa Office. I'll be taking the role of MC for today's event. Nowadays, Africa is facing unprecedented challenges due to multiple external shocks, such as COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine. The importance of strengthening Africa's resilience has been steadily increasing. This August, the 8th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, TICAD8, will be held in Tunis, which I believe will be the perfect opportunity for Africa and the international community to reaffirm our joint commitment to tackle the challenges confronting the continent. Today, ahead of TICAD8, we have invited a wonderful group of panelists to discuss and explore paths for advancing economic integration across Africa. This is critical to the process of building the continent's resilience for sustainable growth and prosperity, and it is a very pressing topic in these turbulent times. Now, it is my honor to introduce the panelists and the moderator before you. However, due to the unforeseen circumstances, I must announce a few changes regarding our panelists and moderator. We have Dr. Towera Nyirenda-Jere, Head of Economic Integration, African Union Development Agency, NEPAD. Mr. Toshiyuki Nakamura, Senior Vice President of Japan International Cooperation Agency. Dr. George Kararachi, Southern Africa Regional Lead Economist at the African Development Bank. Dr. Ayodele Odsola, Resident Representative of South Africa at the UNDP and Director of the UNDP Africa Finance Sector Hub. And finally, today's moderator, Ms. Jennifer Chiriga, Chief of Staff to CEO, AUDA-NEPAD. Now, before we begin the panel discussion, I would like to ask His Excellency Norio Maruyama, Ambassador of Japan to the Republic of South Africa, to give the opening remarks. Please join me in welcoming His Excellency Maruyama.
Good afternoon. Mr. Toshiyuki Nakamura, Senior Vice President, Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA. Welcome to South Africa. It is a long waited important visit from JICA. Thank you very much for your visit. I would like to say thank you as well to Dr. Towera Nyirenda-Jere. Thank you very much for coming today. She's the Head of Economic Integration out of NEPAD, representing these absolutely important institutions to think about what we can do together through the TICAD process. Thank you very much for your presence. I appreciate it a lot. And Dr. George Kararachi, Lead Economist of African Developing Bank. The role of the bank, as you may know, extremely important if we touch upon all those issues. So your presence is also very much appreciated. Thank you very much. And Dr. Ayodele Odsola, represents UNDP South Africa. As you may know, TICAD is co-organized by UN, Japan, UNDP, World Bank, and AUC. The presence of the UNDP is, how can I say, the precondition to talk something related to TICAD. So today we have the right person here. So thank you very much for your presence. And also I thank you, colleagues, ambassadors, to join to us. I acknowledge the presence of Moroccan ambassador from Egypt. Thank you very much for coming today. If I forget the others, and I would like to say thank you very much for those who are representing the Africa and to this country. So thank you very much for your presence. And also, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and I acknowledge also the presence of the business people today. They're very important, especially for the Japanese side. Extremely important to talk about TICAD today. So once again, thank you for your time to join today's symposium. The title is, as you can see, towards TICAD8, Advancing Africa's Integration in Post-Crisis Era. I do remember that every time and I have experienced at TICAD, we do have a lot of crises beforehand. But TICAD itself is not to talk about this crisis as it is, but take into account the consequences that crisis brought to the African continent, which means that the challenges became getting more and more high. The duty of the TICAD is well recognized. And this time, I think that we do have a lot of crises around us. And nobody, I don't need to say which kind of crisis, but the consequences you know very well. This became a developing challenge, and three additional developing challenges for the African continent. So it's very relevant to have TICAD, this symposium talking about TICAD8 at this conjuncture. As you say, TICAD is co-organized, and it's an international conference, first of all, and the framework that's co-organized by Japan, UN, UNDP, World Bank, and the AUC. And it's covered essential fields for the sustainable and comprehensive development of African countries. The key word of TICAD is ownership and partnership. Ownership of African countries, partnership coming from the partners. And the organized, as the one representative of the co-organizer, I am very proud to say that we have already 7 rounds of summit meetings since 1993, and still continuing. We will have the 8th one as indicated at the beginning on the 27th and 28th of August. TICAD8 will hold discussion with 3 main pillars. The first one is economy, for sure, and 2 is the social challenges, and 3 is peace and stability. The component of peace and stability is rather new, but we have a lot of tools, Japan and the UN organization, to how to deal with those peace and stabilities, and with our own means. Sometimes it became a law enforcement support, sometimes to do a little bit more on this law making field. We have a lot of tools to do. So this is why it became very relevant to talk about peace and stability on this. And I will not go further into the detail of these 3 pillars now, but the understanding, the underlying idea could be summarized in this way. How we can further support Africa's prosperous trajectory, and bearing in mind this concept of ownership and partnership. What are the tools to achieve it? I'm certain that the discussions at TICAD8 will lead Africa towards the chapter of action to come, supported by their partners. So who are the partners of the TICAD? One of the strong and powerful partners of TICAD is a Japanese private sector. I recognize the presence of somebody who come from this big company, from that big company, big bank. A lot of people is now here to make maybe their contribution later on. And I would like to underline that the recent round of TICAD have attached huge importance to the participation of the private sector in development in Africa. I remember the first time when we organized outside of Japan, Kenya, and in Nairobi 2016, more than 78 of the Japanese CEO participated to TICAD. it was quite amazing gathering of the top. So TICAD this is all about the business side, economy side of the TICAD. And the government of Japan will put, I want to quote something that has been said by then Prime Minister Shinzo Abe at the Yokohama TICAD8 in 2019. It reflects a lot of the way of thinking of how business will be important, how investment will be important for the success of TICAD. He said, the government of Japan will put forth every possible effort so that the power of Japanese private investment in Africa of $20 billion in 3 years from 2016 to 2019. This was not an announcement, it was the fact that had been done, should in the year to come be surpassed anew from one day to the next. What does it mean? It means that the investment, this is a TICAD is an investment opportunities, and people and business people in Japan consider the TICAD as a kind of support coming from the international society to go further for the investment of Africa. And take, for instance, Japanese recent announcement to investment here in South Africa, Toyota's new hybrid and a car, and Isuzu's D-Max, and also Nissan's as well. This is all something that has been having in mind TICAD. TICAD7, sometimes TICAD6, those are the achievements coming from this side. So this is a very huge impact on this. And TICAD also has proven to be a useful forum for Japanese business to conclude a new MOUs. MOU is very important, and TICAD is a good platform to the announcement of the new MOU. And if you think about MOU, means that MOU with the Japanese business companies and with government itself, government organization, but among the private sector as well. So when we talk about this kind of MOU in the context of Japan and South Africa, my expectation is very high. We need to think about the future, not only for Japan and South Africa, but this continent with Japan is thinking about the future to come in 30, 40 years ahead. I'm thinking about the 2015 as a year that we declared carbon neutral in Japan. For carbon neutral, renewable energy is very important. Just energy transition is a keyword to explain how this country is so much working to go ahead. So what I'm expecting for this new MOU to be held between Japan and South Africa, it will be nice if both leading business companies will make an MOU thinking about the future of this hydrogen society, for example. MOU for hydrogen may be something that can emerge from the TICAD8 next. So it will be very interesting to be interested on what will happen on the TICAD. And also the outcome of the TICAD, everything that we discussed, will be a kind of the consensus among Japan and the international organization of African countries. And so it became the basic policy of Japan for the development cooperation toward Africa from next TICAD. So what we'll be achieving this year from 2022 will be the trajectory of which area and which direction Japan will go, and for these 3 years. And also, this direction adopted at the meeting are going to be reflected in the Japanese government's contribution to international organizations, especially for the co-organizer, UN organizations, and starting from the UNDP, because you are, since the inception of the conference as the co-organizers, but also a lot of international organizations, we consider this very important to get the project to be realized and with Japan, and thanks to the backup of the TICAD. So TICAD is not just a kind of things that Japanese government do, but partner is very important. Government, private sector, international organization, all together go for the same direction to give this prosperous trajectory of the African development. So I think that today's discussion will help us to create further synergy of our mutual goal and paves the way for raising awareness towards the upcoming TICAD8. The 27th, 28th of August, please remind this day some interesting announcement might come up from that. And under the discussion with all the eminent panelists that we have here today, give us fruitful thought for us, for the participants, and also for the head of state who will attend the TICAD8 meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Before we start, I'd like to introduce today's program briefly. Shortly, we will have a panel discussion among distinguished guests for about 1 hour, followed by a question and answer session. We will close this event around 3:30 p.m. and then move on to the reception just outside of this room. Today we have around 100 attendees here in person and more viewing online. For our audience in this room, please keep wearing your masks. For panelists and moderator, you may take off your mask for discussion. So I am now going to hand over to our moderator to start the panel discussion. Over to you, Ms. Jennifer Chiriga, Chief of Staff to CEO, AUDA-NEPAD. Ms. Chiriga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Homa. It's a great honor for me to moderate this important session today, especially in these days when the world is facing crisis upon crisis. And needless to say, the current context has been affecting Africa tremendously, and now resilient and inclusive socioeconomic development is critically important, especially for Africa's future and our prosperity on the continent. Regional economic integration, today's discussion topic, has a key role to play in moving towards and achieving this objective. I'm sure that regional integration will be one of the key topics for the coming TICAD8. I hope that today's dialogue among important development institutions on African development will feed into the discussion of TICAD8. As we go into the discussion, I would like to invite Dr. Toela Miranda-Jere, Head of Economic Integration at AUDA-NEPAD, to share the AUDA-NEPAD's perspective on Africa's situation in the midst of multiple crises and on the opportunities and challenges for Africa's regional integration in such challenging times. Dr. Toela, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and good afternoon to participants, those physically present and those joining online, and then also good afternoon to my fellow panelists. I think it's important perhaps to always remember that the African Union's establishment was premised on the idea of integration, that was the sole purpose of why our leaders came together into the Union. And within that, they had a number of measures and things that they put in place that actually see us advancing in terms of both regional and economic integration. I think very important to acknowledge, I think, that in the free trade area, in fact, as we started trading in 2021, we are well on our way towards that aspiration of connecting 1 to 2 billion people with a combined GDP in excess of about $2 trillion that will create the world's largest economic market. The Cfta, in terms of its objective, of course, create that peace-wide market, the opportunity in terms of industrialization, but also seeks to make sure that we're able to provide sustainable means of lifting people out of poverty to productive capacities that can develop thereof. We have projections that with the Cfta fully implemented, lift up to 38 million poverty, we can improve the incomes of about 60 billion plus, and we can also use the Cfta as the impetus to accelerate digitalization. Underlying that, and really thinking about the fact that we're talking about integration, we also acknowledge the fact that that will require a lot of effort in terms of building very sustainable, quality and resilient infrastructure that will underpin and drive connectedness that is required to support African trade. I think if we start looking at the issues around infrastructure, we're looking at transport, looking at ICT and specialization, making sure that we have adequate energy resources to drive that industrialization, and then also looking at the ways in which we improve quality and access to water, not only for transportation and productive usage of agriculture, but also for health and sanitation as well. And having said that, talk about innovation and thinking about Fcfta, thinking about infrastructure development, I think we have to always be mindful about the fact that the idea is to connect and connecting people to each other, connecting them with opportunities, connecting them to them being able to actually maximize the usage of infrastructure and productive capacities. So when we think about the aspect of connecting people, we also acknowledge and understand where are people that need to be connected, especially when we start facilitating that trade. Statistics show that there is significant emergence of populations in border towns that currently have more than about 600 border towns that have populations that are within 40 kilometers of towns across borders into other countries. And that population is growing. And I think what we have to then be able to look at is how are we going to, number one, connect those border communities to the centers of production cities, but also how do we facilitate connections across borders that would allow for that free services. In relation to that, I think one has to then also factor in the fact that a lot of these communities are looking for access to market opportunities. A lot of them are informal traders. Therefore, one has to think about how you bring those traders and integrate them for the economy. So I think a lot of opportunities in terms of being able to deliver on the promise of the Cfta, but we have to also acknowledge and recognize that there is a lot of work that has to be done. Some of it I think has already been as a speech in terms of the fact that there's a need for ownership by ourselves as Africans, but that there's also that need for partnerships that will help us in terms of driving the ambitions of achieving integration.
Thank you very much, Dr. Toela, for these insightful interventions. And by the way, Dr. Toela has very ably stood in for our CEO. This event was actually on her schedule, but due to an unforeseen emergency, she couldn't join us today. So reflecting on the situation that Dr. Toela has just mentioned, it's high time that African countries, as well as the international community, strengthen partnerships and make joint efforts to overcome these challenges. Now, I would like to pose this question from the viewpoint of development institutions. Dr. Odusola, what is the UNDP's perspective about the key for Africa to build back better from these crises?
Thank you, Madam Moderator, Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I think the issue is really very clear if you look at it from development dimension. Dealing with the issue that we have in post-crisis era, whether post-COVID or post-Russian-Ukraine war, I think one thing we have to probably note in Africa is that what is happening as a result of this crisis happened to be a manifestation of the structural weakness in the economic management, not only at country but also continentally, because it really shows that we need to break away from dependency syndrome. Dependency on the importation of food items that can be produced maximally on the continent and exported to the rest of the world. Dependency in only becoming a specialist of primary exporters of primary commodities, when we know actually that where values are being created, are being added to primary commodities is where wealth and jobs are being created. So once we continue to do that, it becomes pretty difficult to take care of a very youthful population in terms of creating decent jobs for them. And also because of the low value content policy in Africa, where we don't add value. And the beauty of it is that one, TICAD has really given us an opportunity, because TICAD is one of the very few win-win partnership on the continent. And I'm saying it because I've been part of it for more than a decade. And two, because in 2016, they introduced what we call the structural economic transformation as one of the strategies that Africa can use to take the lead in turning this around. By this, we're talking about diversifying our export base, diversifying our income, economic activities at the country level, and also stop the industrialization that Africa has been experiencing over the past 10 years. More than 10 years, almost about 2.5 decades since the introduction of structural adjustment program on the continent. And I think this is where we need to really see, how do we add value to our primary commodities, whether it's in the area of agriculture, whether it's in the area of metals and oil and gas. These are things we need to add, because when you add value, 1% increase in the value add to any primary commodity increases the price by not less than 15% simultaneously. So this is what we need to do in bringing development dimension into this. And on this note, for instance, if you look at the African agro-businesses, it has the projection UNDP made between now and 2030 is that Africa's agro-businesses, whether upstream or downstream, backward or forward integration, has capacity to generate $3.7 trillion, which is almost close to almost tripling the current GDP of the continent. But we're not adding value at all. So that's why the issue of joblessness is quite high. I think we need to do more about that. Also, when it comes to the issue of de-risking the investment climate, for Africa to be what they call investment destination, we need to de-risk the investment climate in a number of ways. One, if you look at ease of doing business, only 2 countries, are below, got between first and 50%. We're talking about Rwanda and Mauritius. Now, we need to really make sure we make the issue of business competitive environment quite solid. This is really very important. Otherwise, it will be difficult for us to be investment destination by foreign investors. 2, we need to really make sure that we expand the fiscal space of the continent. Currently, we're within the neighborhood of 17.5%, whereas if you look at the Addis Ababa Agenda for Action, we need a minimum of about 24% of your revenue GDP ratio for you to catalyze development. So we need to really make sure we grow this. And in doing this, we have to increase our domestic resource mobilization. We have to stop illicit financial flows, which UNCTAD projected to be 86 billion every year flowing out of the continent. So this is, again, an important thing that we need to really do to drive development and making Africa a destination of investment, and also dealing with the triple development challenges of poverty, income inequality, and joblessness. And finally, I just want to anchor on this issue of one of the major principles that TICAD has been preaching since 1993 is the issue of regional integration. And I think this is really good, and kudos to all the excellencies that have contributed to the adoption of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is now in force. But essentially, this is a very good development, but we need to learn in terms of how to maximize the benefits of this for Africa's development. The first one is the psychological dimension, which I think we need to do, work with. African countries do not consume what they produce, and they do not produce what they consume. We need to really think this one around to maximize this. And also, in conclusion, I just want to say, we need to really make sure the rule of origin that guides the implementation of free trade agreement is in place. Otherwise, we may not maximize it. And also for us to ensure that there is what we call compensation mechanism that helps us to really do this. So thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and Excellencies, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sala, for that insightful intervention. You've raised some really major policy response areas that we need to follow if we are to make strides to improve the situation of Africa. Now, I'd like to ask Dr. Kararachi for your views from where you sit in African Development Bank. Please share your perspectives.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, moderator and Your Excellencies, all the invited guests. I think that from the perspective of the bank, I think we certainly believe that there's need for resilience, and we need to build resilience, and we should make sure that we understand disruptions as opportunities. And I'm going to expand quite quickly on that. So in the last 2 years, we had COVID. Now we're talking about the war in Ukraine, and my brother from the UNDP did kind of touch on that. These are also opportunities for us to think very differently in how African economies are actually run. For us, we believe that you need to move beyond emergency response. For example, we put together 10 billion COVID response facility to just make us move to a phase where we will have what I would describe as developmental. Now, to move into that phase, you need to do a couple of things. And I'm going to quickly go through a very short list. First, you need to make sure that you have strong institutions that actually deliver on many of the things that we aspire to get around. Without strong institutions, you will have this problem of illicit financial flows that both the previous speakers talk about. You need infrastructure to get your trade going, to get the Africa Continental Free Trade Area moving. You need to make sure that you have the correct incentives so that your investors can come along. If you have very rigid regimes, you're not likely to get the investors that you want. You need to make sure that you have innovations. Like I said, in the context of COVID, we now have a great opportunity to develop capacity, for example, to produce vaccines. And hopefully people from elsewhere can buy vaccines made in Africa. We also need to make sure that we create an environment that allows for inclusion. There are a lot of our people who are on the margin either of the labor market or they can operate in the economy effectively. Young women, young men. Here in South Africa, we are sitting, for example, on unemployment of close to 66.6% among the youth. And that in itself is problematic. And if we don't take that as a telltale sign of the vulnerabilities of Africa, then I don't know what signal we can actually put as an indicator. We also we should make sure that integration is not just about goods and services, because you can have cultural integration. And a lot of our people live across borders and they speak the same language. And so we need to start working on beyond the curse of Berlin, if to use for a better phrase. And so if you want it, I think the work for all the policymakers and the people of Africa are actually cut out. And I would like to welcome the work that is being done around TICAD, particularly the importance of partnership and ownership. Certainly, we have to own our development agenda, and therefore, the implementation of both the SDGs and Agenda 2063, from the bank's perspective, remain very critical. And we at the bank, we have kind of narrow that down into what we call the high fives. Feed Africa, industrialize in Africa, integrate Africa. All of these things, I think, will remain key as Africa moves forward to try to deal with what a post-crisis world would look like. And that post-crisis world should be a world where Africa will have its own voice at the table, clearly. And I think that augurs well also with Agenda 2063 and also the SDGs. And so for us, we want to work with everybody, particularly making sure that the private sector has a bigger role, and as well as we include all those who are on the margin in all development activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kararachi. You reminded us of the high fives, and you also touched on a key message of resilience. Now, if I may address Mr. Nakamura on JICA's views on development cooperation and how it can be leveraged to contribute to this policy intervention on resilience.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you very much for this opportunity to say a few words on this occasion. And then as Madam Moderator, and he mentioned about the resilience, and then I would say that resilience is also the key to recover from the complex crisis. And I would say in order to strengthen the resilience, of course, we have to quick response in terms of the financial arrangement and so forth. But to get the real resilience, I think it takes some time. And then we have to take several arrangements from several angles, I would say. And then I would say, for instance, like from the development agency point of view, such kind of the long-term commitment works eventually. I would like to mention several cases which worked actually under the COVID-19 crisis. The first one, like JICA and Japanese government, the long-term commitment in medical institutions in Kenya and Ghana. And then that medical institutions, we make a commitment through the financial cooperation and technical cooperation for long term. And then eventually the teachers and the doctors fostered and trained in Japan gave training to the regional medical institutions afterwards. And as a result, they naturally set up the networking in the region in Africa. And then once the crisis occurred, that network naturally worked, like COVID test and then so forth, under the leadership of African CDC. So we didn't expect the COVID-19 crisis, but we did, naturally to overcome such kind of crisis. So it takes some time, but this kind of the activity is important, I think. And the second one shows the right-hand side is kind of the short-term, but very important activities in collaboration with NEPAD. Once that the COVID-19 occurred, unfortunately, we cannot get any kind of the materials, products easily from outside, even the masks. Then NEPAD decided to take an initiative to create the kind of the production network within the continent. Then JICA decided to support to create such kind of the network and then platform and ecosystem within Africa. This is just a pilot project which we started, but I think this kind of activity works eventually, and as a result, we found out several potential companies within Africa to produce some medical equipment or masks and so forth. And then foreign investor decided to invest such kind of the company. So such kind of the ecosystem works eventually, I think. And then thirdly, I would like to mention about the recent against the recent food crisis. As you see, we, JICA and Japanese government, had the initiative called CARD, which is focusing on the doubling the rice production in Africa. And if you can see the graph, we started 2008 that activity, and eventually we reached the double. We succeeded in doubling the production of rice in 2019. Then we decided once again doubling the rice production in Africa. And we, JICA, started by ourselves in 2008. But we tried to set up the platform, and we invite the AfDB and other donors to join these activities and try to make it, make impact larger. So that kind of, a platform activity is also very important to speed up that set up in the kind of the platform, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nakamura. You've stressed the importance of a long-term development approach as the key for building this resilience that we need. And now we are moving on to the next round in our panel discussion. As we're all aware, the operationalization of the African Continental Free Trade Area is the key for a resilient African economy in the long term. The trade under Fcfta started last year, but it needs tremendous efforts by Africa and the international community to make the Continental Free Trade Area accelerate intra-regional trade and contribute to sustainable development. The big question is, how do we do that? I would like to ask all the panelists to answer this question from each perspective. First of all, let me ask Dr. Towela, from AUDA-NEPAD's perspective, what are the most important challenges for operationalizing the African Continental Free Trade Area, and what are the solutions to help us move forward?
Always talked about the fact that although Africa was lagging, that it had then the opportunity to leapfrog and to learn very quickly from what had already come before, and therefore leapfrog and manage to close the digital divide. I think with the CFTA, we sort of see a similar dynamic in the sense that when you look at other regions, they started from a base of having industrialized, and that industrialization, that was then the impetus for creating the common markets and the free trade areas. In Africa's case, I think we are doing it differently because we have the Continental Free Trade Area, and we're using that now as the impetus that will allow us to then industrialize. And I think we need to leverage that. We need to really maximize the fact that the Continental Free Trade Area gives us that opportunity to leapfrog, to industrialize, and really reverse the trend of deindustrialization, as Dr. was saying, and make sure that we do put in place the right enabling environment, the right policies. I think previous speakers have talked about things such as local content policies. We need to look at our policies in terms of how we support MSMEs. How are we helping the MSMEs that will actually produce the goods and services that we need to trade across the continent? How are we making sure that we are able to create an environment that allows them to thrive? This is one of the questions that as AUDA-NEPAD we are looking at in terms of trying to understand the startup ecosystem and trying to understand how can we better support MSMEs so that when they are established, they're able to graduate very quickly out of that startup phase, and they're able to be sustainable, because we need them to be sustainable in order for us to actually maximize the opportunities of the intra-African trade. So understanding the aspects of incubation, the role of digitalization in terms of helping our startup ecosystems, and then also trying to understand issues around access to markets, access to finance, the kind of capacity that needs to be developed both at the formal and informal level that would actually help trading happen in a very sustainable way. I think that a lot has also been said about the fact that we need to diversify, so we need to really look very carefully at our settings of production. We need to look at our local, regional, and global value chains, and really find those niches and those areas where we can actually add value, but adding value in a way that is sustainable and in a way that that maximizes the benefits for our people as well. And then lastly, I think really, when we look at the CFTA and the different policies, procedures, regulations that will have to be implemented, I think it's the pace at which we will implement and do all these things that will really matter. We have the things before us, but how quickly are we going to be able to actually get them done? So I think it is imperative and incumbent upon us to make sure that we do not lose the momentum, that we maintain this pace, and that we do it in a way that really is looking at the greater good, I think, in terms of the benefits of the CFTA and regional integration at large. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Toela, for sharing these perspectives with us. Let me ask Mr. Nakamura, how does JICA support the operationalization of the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Well, thank you very much. I would say regional integration through the Fcfta is a key for the resilience of the continent in the future. I have to say. And this is difficult to identify the key areas of the collaboration in this area. But I just want to mention 3 key areas of the collaboration for AfCFTA. First one is enhancing trade facilitation. Second, strengthening industrial development. Thirdly, supporting leadership of AfCFTA Secretariat. First one, regarding the first one, I would say what we've done in the region. We have had the collaboration in East Africa through the Central Economic Corridor. We did have infrastructure development of the one-stop border post, and then also the Lusmo border. And also, together with the infrastructure development, we providing them with the soft component, technical assistance. And then eventually, as a result, we succeeded in saving the time for passing the border posts, 75% eventually. So it takes some time, but we can make it. That is an example which we've done in one-stop border post. And right now, we are planning to the second round of the one-stop border in southern African regions. We are targeting on the Bay Bridge border post, Kazungura border post, and Chirundu border post. Together with, in collaboration with WCO, World Customs Organizations. We are providing them with the master training program and then try to facilitate and give the capacity development of the border post together with the infrastructure development. So eventually, we can see the progress sometime. And then second one is she mentioned, and then he mentioned about the industrialization of the continent. I would say that in addition to the trade facilitation, we need more focusing on the productivity and also, inviting the investment together with the improvement of business environment. And then I would like to touch upon the Kaizen activities, which was originally started from the Singapore in our corporation, but Kaizen activity started in Ethiopia in 2009. And then now that the activity is expanding, in the continent, together, of course, with the activities AUDA-NEPAD. And then the Kaizen itself is not only the, I can say the productivity. It's like incremental, activities, including like innovation and so forth. So Kaizen is already, how can I say, devised from the original contents which they developed in Japan. And then thirdly, I would like to mention about the capacity development of the Fcfta Secretariat itself. From our experience with ASEAN, we have lots of experiences, what we've done and in successfully, and what we unfortunately did unsuccessfully. So we can provide them with our experience, what we are doing in ASEAN. So and then Fcfta's model is not only easy. I think there are so many choices to select what's the best way, for development Fcfta in the African context. So such kind of activities we can provide in near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nakamura. So we've understood that JICA's contribution is well positioned on wider and long-term perspectives for operationalizing the African Continental Free Trade Area. It's also very interesting to hear JICA's unique position, taking a bridge role of sharing Asia's experience and bringing it to Africa, given the key role that Japan has played in the ASEAN economic integration process. So this bridge role of JICA in Africa has great added value. Now, I'd like to ask Dr. Kararachi for your views on infrastructural development, seeing as it's one of the key aspects that makes intra-regional trade functional. The AfDB has been a leading development partner promoting the realization of PIDA. So please share your views.
Yeah, so for those who might don't know, PIDA is the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa. And it's a continental blueprint, if you want, on infrastructure. And the bank has been engaged, particularly with you guys from AU agency, NEPAD, in this work. We developed the PIDA Priority Action Plan 1, PIDA Part 1, and we put, if I remember correctly, something like $9 million among other support to NEPAD for the operationalization of the plan. Right now, we are working on PIDA Part 2, and that work is quite advanced. The plan runs until, I think, 2030, as far as I understand it. So there's a lot of work in that regard. But we also believe that it's infrastructure is not just in transport systems, but also in a range of areas like ICT. Right now, we need to think of our infrastructure in a post-pandemic world. For example, where e-commerce is a big thing, or promises to be a big thing. And in that regard, ICT will remain critical, and access to things like data will remain important. So lowering the cost of data will facilitate the growth of e-commerce, and that is critical. We need to also think about things like water and sanitation. They will remain important. Energy, you can't talk about productivity if your cost of production is going to be ramped up by insecure energy sources. And so we are putting a lot of effort in that. For example, we have developed, again, with AUDA-NEPAD, what we call the Africa Energy Master Plan. We also have the Presidential Infrastructure Champion Initiative, as well as we have the Infrastructure Project Preparatory Facility, as well as the Technology for Africa Agricultural Transformation, to make sure we have issues around food security sorted out. So for us, thinking about the AfTA is more than just infrastructure. We are thinking food, we are thinking energy security, we are thinking dealing with the digital divide, if there's any such thing. We are talking about trade facilitation. We are talking about capacity building, the kind of thing that Dr. Goremura actually talked about. So we think that these interventions should be across the board, but we also need to think about clearly about how we make sure that our investments are quality in all of these areas, because the quality of the investment will determine the kind of outcomes we'll derive where we put our money. And that also means we need to focus not just in terms of putting in new things, we need to think about issues of maintenance. If you look at the numbers, we think that maintenance alone will cost about $40 billion annually in Africa, 35 to 40 billion to maintain the infrastructure that we have. But if you talk about total infrastructure requirements, our latest estimate shows something close between 130 to 170 billion annually. And so these are huge figures, but these are figures that if we put energy into it and we put money where our mouth is, it's actually doable. Right now, I think about 37% of the resources used in infrastructure investments in Africa actually come from governments. So our governments might look a little bit poor, but I think they're really walking the talk in this regard. And that's why we need all the development partners on board. And I would want to thank JICA for being on Africa's side. And I'm sure many others around this room will come along and work with Africa on this in this journey towards a prosperous continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kararachi. Now, in the course of our discussions, some panelists have referred to the importance of small and medium enterprises in terms of building their capacity, in terms of building their competitiveness. My question to Dr. Odusola is, can you share your views on how SMEs can be supported in light of what needs to happen in the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Moderator. There are a number of things which UNDP is doing on the continent with respect to small-scale enterprises, which we think is the engine room of growth and development for the continent. One of the things which we observed is the ability to really see how can we really foster the linkages between small-scale enterprises and the big companies all over African countries. Through what we call supply development program, which we have developed across many African countries, so that when big companies have, for instance, contract with government, for instance, in Kenya, about 70% of contract either for construction of supply of anything must be given to small-scale enterprises. This is one of the things we advocate across the continent. And also, for instance, in South Africa, we realize that small-scale enterprises, particularly operating in rural areas, have serious challenges when it comes to the issue of data, access to data. What we did here is to support and promote what we call low-cost internet access due to the partnership we have with the Council for Scientific Industrial Research and also with the government of Japan. We have succeeded in introducing low-cost internet access in 4 provinces. And before the end of this year, we intend to scale it up to 10, to all the 9 provinces, and then have some additional one. Now, the idea there, the reason why we are doing this is that we realize that for you to have in South Africa access to 1 gigabyte from the big boys like MTN, Vodacom, and Co., you need between 85 Rand to 150 Rand. The last one we launched, this low-cost internet access for small-scale enterprises we launched in KwaZulu-Natal last year is only 5 Rand compared to about 85 to 150 Rand. So that's one of it. And also we've been working with a number of stakeholders in order to ensure that we promote the capacity of SME incubators across African countries. Because this is where we need in terms of how do we really empower them to be able to really produce to standard and quality. This is part of the infrastructure we've been putting in place across all African countries. But I just want to really also mention one of the partnerships we've been doing with the Secretariat of the AfCFTA in terms of looking at the fact that Africa is a continent with the largest members of the UN, accounting for almost about 28% of the UN membership, 54, 55 countries. And what we did, we then realized that every country has its own trade and investment policies. Meaning, if a company registers in South Africa, for it to operate in Nigeria, it has to register in Nigeria. For it to operate in Ethiopia, it has to register. In Cote d'Ivoire, it has to register. We now look at, there's a project we are currently doing with the Secretariat in terms of regulation as a stimulus. where we're trying to promote harmonization of trade and investment policies across African countries. And I think because without that, it would be very difficult for you to really achieve cohesive trade integration. I would think this is one of the things that is really very important for us to really do this. And also, if you look at most African countries, particularly here, as of 2019, you realize that about 70% of small-scale enterprises die before they celebrate their third anniversary. And we see this is really a serious challenge. If it happens in South Africa, it's worse in many other African countries. So what we do is to develop a kind of youth entrepreneurship action hub that helps to build the capacity of small-scale entrepreneurs, also promote what they call link them to financial institutions and link them to market. This is one of the things we do on the ground. An example of it is the Malawi Innovation Challenge Funds, purely for women, which as we speak today, we started it in about 2015, but as we speak today, women are now exporting things, goods and services outside Malawi. So this is one of the things which we thought there's need for us to do, because without capacity, it would be very difficult for us to really promote the kind of capacity, the SMEs that will be able to use African Continental Free Trade Agreement as an entry point of driving growth and development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dusola. You raised some really important considerations where SMEs could thrive. Data has been highlighted as really very, very important, and you've alluded to the linkages that could be of benefit between SMEs and big companies, private sector. So we really thank you for these interesting perspectives that you've brought in. Now we would like to open the floor for questions from the audience. For the audience in the room here, you please raise your hand and the team will hand over a microphone, but I see there are microphones on the desks already. So please don't forget to state your name and affiliation when you ask questions. Please also keep your questions and answers to the panel very brief to allow to have broader engagement in the meeting. And you can also use, for those online, they can use the Q&A function to ask questions, and the team will bring this to the moderator's attention. As well, for those online, please write your name and your affiliation so that we know who you are. So I would like to take the first question from the participants present here in the room. Anyone? I think we had... Your Excellency, Ambassador of Morocco. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Let me, first of all, thank you very much for this initiative. It's a very timely initiative. It comes within a difficult context for all of us, post-COVID, because we are called, all of us, Africans and partners, to build up our economies and to find jobs for our young generation. It is important because of the topic is crucial, advancing Africa's economic integration in this context. So I would like to make 2 points, if you allow me, 2 points. The first point is about the TICAD. I think, as I was saying earlier, these 2 years have changed completely our partnership opportunities, reinforcing as Africans, our core belief on international cooperation. And in this context, and within this belief, TICAD, Japan, constitutes an important and key mechanism for Africa's interaction with its partners beyond the continent, because it is a unique platform of our scheme of cooperation which promotes development, but also understanding between, and I see very sincerely, Ambassador, promoting understanding between Africa and Japan as a major partner without intervening on some people. You know what I mean? So the TICAD for the last years has evolved by gaining relevance, efficiency, and impact. It was only work on our priorities, job creation, promotion of growth. So we have witnessed with great satisfaction, and I'm speaking as a Moroccan and as African, with great satisfaction what we have achieved, because your policy is based on ownership and international partners' values. This is my first. My second point is our role as Africans. I followed with great importance and attention the different intervention panelists. You have, I could completely share with you the instruments, the analysis, and I agree with that. We need investment, we need innovation, free trade agreement, and maybe something I think was lacking in intervention. Because at the end of the day, what is important is the human dimension of our cooperation. Is the African men and women. How could we address the real challenges? Of course, this instrument will help, but I think something there was missing. Madam, I think you have said that we have to respond to the expectation of young generation population. It's important, and I think the human dimension must be very. My second point I wanted to make, I'll say autocritique or something like that. And this meeting comes timely and falls well within the message that was addressed yesterday by His Majesty King Mohammed VI to the participants of launching conference on Africa sovereign investors. I think this is, we need to do our own homework as Africans. International cooperation is important, the tools are important, and as His Majesty was saying yesterday, it is to all of us African countries to take our destiny into our own hands and to seek individually and collectively to turn our resources and potential into promising achievement for our citizens and our future generation. I quoted the intervention of His Majesty. So today, and I agree with you as you were saying, we have a lot of opportunities, particularly, and I will tackle these issues: the green economy, the blue economy, the digital sector was mentioned today. So our continent today must keep up its efforts in order to face the challenges. And the importance of this topic, integration, is essential. I will finish by that. One country alone, regardless its strength, its capacities cannot face alone these challenges. So that's why we need to work together. We need to build up coherent regional schemes. It's good to have the instrument, the free trade agreement, but if we lack the political will, if we lack the leadership, if we lack the commitment, we are moving nowhere. Trade, infrastructure will help, but this element, I think, is important. And today, we have no other choice as Africans to sit together, to plan together, and to work together. And that's why I was really seduced by the topic, integration. We need to learn from our partners, but we need also to do our homework. And the key to face the challenges is coherent regional schemes that puts, of course, the human being, the African, in the center of any strategies. But I think now we have the tools. Maybe we need something else. We have this free trade agreement. We need more infrastructure, but maybe we need something else to speed up. I'm talking as an African that believes in international cooperation, but also believes on our own capacities as Africans to face these challenges. And the integration scheme is a must that we must work on it. We need to forget about the outdated ideologies, and we need to work. Because what matters at the end of the day is how much jobs we create for our young generation and how much growth we can achieve. Beside, of course, security and stability. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to be so long, but I wanted to share with you. But thank you also, Jaika, all the interventions for their really very, very positive, very enlightening intervention. And I'm very happy to see that we have now, as Africans, as experts, a clear picture of what we need, but how we achieve it is another story.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I'll go there and then Ambassador, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the panel for absolutely inspiring messages. When I first saw post-crisis era, I thought that we're not in the post-crisis era. But that's because we're exposed to media all the time that are telling us only the bad news. We come to a venue like this, we hear constructive stuff being done. But there's also an optimistic message in venues like this. So I want to ask of the panel, what message would you like each of us to take back to our communities and our organizations in terms of the big challenges that we face in integrating our economies going forward? So what are the challenges, what are the obstacles to this integration post-crisis development? And what actions should we be proposing back to our communities and organizations? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. I'll take Ambassador of Egypt, Your Excellency, and then we'll give the panel a chance to respond.
Thank you. Thank you, the panel, for this important briefing, and looking forward to a successful TICAD8 very soon. Since the topic is about integration, I took note that we had 4 entities telling us what they're doing in terms of integration in Africa: the NEPAD, JICA, AfDB, and the UNDP. But we haven't much heard about what we're doing together for Africa. So each one was talking about his or her own entity. Whereas I would believe at this time, since we're at challenging times, there will be a need for enhanced cooperation and coordination between the various development entities for the sake of the continent to identify the various synergies and eliminate any overlaps and address gaps and so forth. So perhaps, yes, I know some are, JICA said that it's doing some work with NEPAD and so forth, but collectively, there needs to be a more collective approach between those important entities. So it would be useful to hear what you are doing in this regard or what you're planning to do in this regard. I don't see that there are enough resources to be wasted in individual tracks. So this is the first point. The second point is, since we're talking about integration, and the Ambassador of Japan has alluded that the whole concept of TICAD is pillared around ownership and partnership, and he mentioned the significant presence of Japanese companies, I would have liked to see a representative of the Japanese companies on the panel, not just in the audience, because they have a role to play, they have a story to tell as well in this regard. The third element here, when we talk about integration, as Africans, we always sometimes run into the issue of how do we define Africa? Geographically, we all know what Africa is. When it comes to investment, when it comes to politics, for some odd reason, Africa tends to be more about sub-Saharan Africa. North Africa is not as integrated. Even some companies in their various divisions, their organigrams, they would consider the Africa division simply to be sub-Saharan Africa. But now, with the work being done on the Cfta, here we're talking about integrating the whole continent. Is this in the mindset of the development agencies such as JICA and also other companies, the Japanese companies, that now we're going to be treating Africa as a whole, collectively? Or are we still in the old business of saying that Africa is just about sub-Saharan Africa? I say this, of course, as a North African who's proud to be African and would like that the continent be fully integrated with such. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think for now we'll take those questions and ask the panelists if they would like to make some response. Can I start with you, Dr. Odusola?
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I think let me use the accounting principle, last in, first out. Excellency, thank you for that very, very important question in terms of synergy among institutions that are operating on the continent. I think it's really a very vital one, but it might be because of limitation. There are a number of things we do together. For instance, we just completed with AUDA-NEPAD the what they call 1,000 SME supports across African countries, which we're doing together. And the idea is just to scale it up to another level. And also, Ambassador Mariama, myself, Jaika, we just about 2 months ago, we launched a novel thing here, automotive skill of the 21st century, which we want to be the center of excellence for the entire continent, which we launched in KwaZulu-Natal with the Minister of Higher Education. Clearly shows the kind of thing we're doing together. It's really something that, because we believe in the principle behind the issue of working together, synergy, where 1 + 1 is greater than 2. And also, we've been doing a lot of things with the African Development Bank, the African Union, ADB, Economic Commission for Africa. Particularly, every year we organize the African Economic Conference, where we bring issues like this together. I think the last time we did on regional integration was it last year, and then the 2018. So these are things which we believe in what you've said, because coming together, reduces a lot of transaction costs, which help us to really move along that trajectory. And this other thing relating to what His Excellency from Morocco mentioned, particularly what is African Continental Free Trade Agreement for? In UNDP, when we created in 1990, Human Development Index is just for that. So that we shouldn't be carried away by the process, but the outcome. So we must ensure whatever we do, we put people at the center, the beginning and the end of the entire process. So I think that's really, again, another principle that will guide us in terms of how we move forward, so that we are not carried away by the instruments. But how do we translate the instrument into concrete development outcomes that improve the well-being of men and women in Africa, as well as in other parts of the world? Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank
you very much, Dr. Odusola, for that very clear response. There was a question from Professor Norman on obstacles and what actions should be taken to the communities. Mr. Nakamura, would you like to handle that question?
Okay. Thank you very much for a very difficult question to answer. That it's a very important and very, how can I say, once again, important and very difficult to answer. But as someone mentioned, eventually we are talking about the society or community or human, individual humans. So therefore, we, Japanese government and JICA, is always emphasized on the human security. That is very beginning from the TICAD. We always mention about the concept of the human security. Human security is no one left behind. That is a basic idea of the human security. And then, as Ambassador mentioned, one of the key areas of collaboration for TICAD8 is stable and peaceful Africa. So therefore, I would say, and then all the stakeholders for TICAD8 is basically agreed on the concept. I think all the partners and all the stakeholders under the difficult situation, especially complex crisis. So that is the bottom line of the TICAD8, I believe. Therefore, I think I speak to other agency yesterday. We would like to include the youth on the continent because the employment ratio on the continent is critical, and also the women is important for us to lift up the economy and so forth. And then if you think about such kind of the, how can I say, so-called marginalized population, we think about another areas of the collaboration. We think we're talking about the economic integration, but we simultaneously have to think about health, education, social network, and so forth. So integration needed, integrated approach. That is our consensus for TICAD8, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Karachi, can I give you just 1 minute for last comments? Because we have one question from online.
I got
candidates.
the message back home, 3 items. One, opportunities exist in North Africa, in Sub-Saharan Africa. So that's one message. The other message is ownership. Africa must be at the center of what it wants to do. I think the ambassador from Morocco couldn't put it any better. Nobody's going to do your thing for you. So ownership is at the core of that. And finally, partnership. So 3 messages back to the grassroots. Opportunities do exist. And there's need for ownership. If you don't own it, you can't have control over it. And then finally, you need partners to get them moving. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's a question that was raised online by one of the participants, and this is a question for Dr. Toela. The African Continental Free Trade Area has been hailed as a game changer to boost intra-African trade, as well as strengthen links between global supply chains. How can countries and regional blocs improve trade governance at home and at their borders through domestic and regional reforms? And that will be our last question. So, Dr. Toela.
Okay. Thank you very much. A very interesting question, and one, I suppose, that has many dimensions to it. But I think a lot has been said about the fact that there is a need in terms of the harmonization of policies, procedures across the continent. The Fcfta is a framework, it sets the foundation, but it is really up to us in terms of how we address the issues of harmonization, whether it is in terms of the investment policies, whether it is in terms of how we are supporting MSMEs, whether it is even in terms of the ways in which we handle and manage processes and procedures at our border posts. So I think it is really incumbent upon us, which I think the ambassadors have alluded to, in terms of how we own the process and how we make sure that as we're owning the process, we're putting people at the center and we're making sure that whatever we're doing has that primary objective of uniting the continent, but making sure that we're taking care of those issues around our governance, our supply chains, our productive capacities, and obviously the aspects around uplifting people out of poverty and creating jobs and opportunities. With your indulgence, I would just like maybe just to address the particular issue around the messages. I think from our perspective, when we look at issues around infrastructure development and trade facilitation and so on, I think it has been said the opportunities are there. We also know that the financing is there. But the question is, where is the financing going? What is it being directed to? How can we make sure that we are adequately supporting our governments who are ready and willing to put money into the projects, but who need perhaps additional support in terms of preparing this project to bankability so we can actually access those funds? There's a lot of different tools and instruments within AUDA-NEPAD, within the AfDB, I think our colleagues at UNDP as well. But the issue, I think, for us is always about these issues around early stage project preparation, and the fact that if we're not putting money into early stage project preparation, we will not see these projects come to fruition.
So really, I think the appeal is to our partners is to really critically look at where are we putting the financing to make sure that these projects actually see the light of day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Toela. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I'd like to thank all the participants for these lively discussions and very, very thoughtful insights. We were able to reaffirm the significance of steady progress on regional economic integration for building a resilient economy on our continent. I strongly believe that today's discussions are going to pave the way for a really great TICAD8 that's coming up. And I would like lastly to express sincere gratitude to all the panelists and thank you also to the audience. I'm very proud that AUDA-NEPAD could lead the discussions in this afternoon's meeting. Thank you very much.
Yes, we need more time to discuss. But it's time to conclude this session. Thank you to all the panelists and the moderator. Once again, please give a big hand for the speakers. Before closing this session, Dr. Nirendra Jere has a brief announcement to make. Over to you, Dr. Nirendra Jere.
Do I need to come up there or try it from here?
You can come.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremonies, and good afternoon again to the Excellencies, distinguished guest participants, and the fellow panelists. So on behalf of our CEO, Madam Nados Pikele Thomas, who could not be with us this afternoon, allow me first of all to begin by thanking you all for joining us in this event to witness the launching of the third edition of the One Stop Border Post OSBP Sourcebook. This third edition comes at a significant time for us when we are, on the one hand, as we have already discussed, dealing with the impacts of COVID-19 on cross-border movements, and on the other hand, considering the role of border posts as we operationalize the African Continental Free Trade Area. Trade, which is a key driver of growth and development, is invaluable in bringing people out of poverty and into prosperity, and I think much has been said about the fact that we need to put people at the center of everything that we're doing. However, we also recognize that trade in Africa has not yet achieved its full potential of achieving sustainable economic growth and development. The Fcfta is well positioned to change this narrative and to support the creation of more integrated markets across the continent. By removing trade barriers and allowing the free movement of goods, services, and people across Africa, the Fcfta will help to increase the combined consumer and business spending on the continent. Another attribute of African trade is that it has a very high external orientation, and I think other speakers before me also spoke about this, and therefore we have a very limited volume of intra-African trade. Since most African countries are trading with countries outside the continent, we are yet to fully harness the complementarities and take full advantage of the economies of scale that greater market integration can provide. Against this backdrop, one-stop border posts, OSBPs, are central to enhancing interconnectivity and to deepening regional market integration through the processing of border clearance formalities at one location. Following the launch of the first functional OSBP at Chirundu between Zambia and Zimbabwe, the concept and development of OSBPs has expanded rapidly. And as of 2016, we had more than 80 OSBPs or joint border posts in the planning or implementation stages across the continent. At present, the total number of OSBPs is approaching 120. In line with PIDA, the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, several projects to implement OSBPs have been undertaken and more are planned to connect cross-border infrastructure and contribute to increasing the volume of trade that is anticipated from the AfCFTA. As Africa moves towards continent-wide integration, OSBPs will play a critical role in enabling the free movement of goods, people, services, and investments. The OSBP Sourcebook, an operational guide to the OSBP concept,
covers issues such as legal and regulatory frameworks, the simplification and harmonization of border procedures, the design of physical border facilities, and how to best make use of digitalization and the opportunities of using ICTs. The readers that are targeted by the sourcebook are mainly practitioners, government officials at the decision-making levels, and border officers who process day-to-day border operations, as well as users such as private operators, including importers and exporters, clearing and forwarding agents, transporters, small traders, and local communities that cross borders to transport their goods, to travel, and to move regionally. The first edition of the OSPP sourcebook was prepared by JICA and AUDA-NEPAD in 2011. In May 2016, we released the second edition of the OSPP sourcebook together with our partners at the Infrastructure Consortium for Africa at AfDB and with the support of JICA. Since the publication of the second OSPP sourcebook, we've seen two major developments: the launching of the Fcfta and, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. And this has resulted in a need for us to revise the sourcebook. One focus of updating the sourcebook is to consider the potential impacts of the Fcfta, which is expected to result in major changes in industrialization, trade volumes, and trade patterns, which would then affect the planning and implementation of OSPPs. Another focus of the revision is to incorporate the lessons that we have learned and are still learning from the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has affected trade and cross-border traffic, and it has required implementation of strict protocols and the setting up of social infrastructure to prevent transmission of the virus. It is thus necessary to provide guidelines to effectively control the spread of the infection through OSPPs while maintaining or minimizing negative impacts on trade and cross-border traffic. The successful publication of this third edition of the sourcebook is a significant milestone which should be celebrated, especially as we reflect on the discussions that we have had today and as we prepare for the upcoming TICAD meeting. However, the work does not end here, and it will be important that we continue to obtain more buy-in and reach as many stakeholders as possible for full utilization and adaptation of the OSPP development on the ground. We need to work together to accelerate the journey towards regional and economic integration, making maximum use of this invaluable guide as a step towards continental development. As I conclude, let me take this opportunity to express the gratitude of AUDA-NEPAD to JICA for your concerted efforts and collaboration with us in preparing and launching this important tool. I would also like to acknowledge the various stakeholders, including the regional economic communities, border authorities, corridor management agencies, and many others that participated in the various consultations as part of the development of the sourcebook. As AUDA-NEPAD continues to spearhead the implementation of PIDA and to support the Fcfta, we value the continued support of our partners and stakeholders to facilitate this process towards an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa. With those few remarks, it is my singular pleasure and honor on behalf of our CEO to officially launch the third edition of the OSPP sourcebook. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nirenda Jere. And with that, we conclude today's event. Once again, I'd like to thank all the panelists, the moderator, and our wonderful audiences, both here in person and who have joined us online. Thank you very much.